life. She was a Jewish woman of a devout family, and when she was 14 years old, she consciously chose to pretty much reject her faith, but she was still a searcher for the truth. And there are so many people out there searching for truth that stumble across this Catholic television network. And trust me, I've heard from you. So I continue to. I think this is the fourth time I've done it in my priesthood. And I have gotten letters saying, Father, thank you for pushing me off the fence. So if anybody is out there that needs a little bit of a prod, a little bit of a push, this is me maybe giving you a little bit of a jolt this morning. Maybe you don't need a prod, but maybe you need to be totally immersed in God's mercy. Just an invitation simply. The church proposes, the church doesn't impose. And this is me proposing to you the truth of the gospel, the truth of the Catholic faith. St. Teresa Benedicta of the Cross, again, she was the youngest of 11 children in a Jewish family, and her family was a very religious family. And she herself gave up faith in God, and these are her own words. I consciously decided of my own volition to give up praying. I consciously decided to give up praying. I think some of you have had that conscious choice in your life too, where you stop praying in your life and you notice something happening in your life. She was a student of philosophy, and philosophy is a quest for truth. It's man's quest for truth, man's quest for meaning, man's quest for purpose in life. It's asking the very relevant questions that all of us ask in life. What is the meaning of life? Why am I here? How do I come to know these things? These are questions that all of us ask, or really should ask throughout our lives. She was a pupil and teaching assistant of a well-known philosopher, Edmund Husserl, a phenomenologist, who would later tutor her for her doctorate in philosophy, which she graduated with summa cum laude. And she wrote her thesis on the problem of empathy. And in God's plan, this was probably the Lord preparing her heart to receive the truth. Because what is empathy? Empathy is somebody that really feels somebody else's pain. Somebody that can walk through with somebody. And it's a lot different than sympathy. Empathy is somebody who walks next to somebody, knows somebody, and really chooses to enter into their pain, enter into their suffering. So she did her doctorate studies on this particular problem, if you say in philosophy, you would say the problem of empathy or the problem of pain. During this period of her life, she went into a Catholic cathedral in Frankfurt, Germany, and she saw a woman going to kneel in this church for brief prayer. And this is what she said. This was something totally new to me. In the synagogues and Protestant churches I had visited, I simply went to services. Here, and she says here in this Frankfurt Cathedral, however, I saw someone coming straight from a busy marketplace into this empty church, as if she was going to have an intimate conversation. It was something that I never forgot. Something very interesting. And it points to the reality of what so many people have come to experience when they walk in a Catholic church and experiencing the real presence of Jesus in the Eucharist. Something that I experienced as a young man in my early 20s, just experiencing a presence, something that I couldn't put into words. Someone is there with me. And at the end of her dissertation, she wrote, "There have been people who believed that a sudden change had occurred within them, and that this was a result of God's grace." So in phenomenology is a study of human experience. Study how someone comes to know the truth based on their own experience. So in her study and in her dialogue with people, she came to realize and to see other people's walk of faith. She came to see how other people in their own experience came to know who God was. And that we can really call that where the subjective, where our subjective faith comes into contact with objective truth. That there exists objective truth outside of myself. And this is the problem that our culture constantly battles with and won't recognize, that truth exists outside of yourself. Outside of you. You are not dependent upon the truth. Whether you believe it or not, truth is truth. And in the study, really in philosophy, that's where philosophy comes into contact with truth, with the cross, with Jesus so often, with the truth of the gospel, is that in our quest for truth as subjects, we come into contact with something, truth, objective, that is outside of ourselves. And this is exactly what St. Teresa Benedicta of the Cross came into contact with. She came into contact with a truth that was undeniable. But at the same time, she experienced it as a person. She came to experience and she came to know objective truth, something outside of herself. She became good friends with Husserl's assistant, Adolf Reinach, and his wife. And Adolf died in 1917, and then Edith went to visit his widowed wife. And this is her recount of meeting this woman with such faith. And this is again before her conversion, but before becoming a Christian. This is Edith's words. "This was my first encounter with the cross and the divine power it imparts to those who bear it. It was the moment when my unbelief collapsed and Christ began to shine his light on me. Christ in the mystery of the cross."